Hey guys, welcome back. Today we want to look at the last concepts of object-oriented programming. And specifically, we want to look at encapsulation and how encapsulation helps to make attributes private, and which then we need to use getter and setter methods. And the last thing we'll look at is polymorphism. So as always, guys, you need to open up the Google Colab document. And once we have done with the videos, please do go through the tasks and practice the things that we've learned, so put it into practice. So, to begin with, think of a class a bit like a function in the sense that what's inside the class, so for example, its methods and attributes, and specifically its attributes, can be kept private. So if you remember, we would use a dot method to access an attribute. So for example, we can use the instantiated name of an object, dot, and then the name of the attribute, and we would be able to access it or print it or display it. Now, in this case, what we have is a simple example of a bank account. And what we're doing is we're just assigning the value of balance just to make a point, just to show how it's done. And what you can see here is when we assign balance to itself, we've got a double underscore, and that makes the attribute private. Now, it doesn't mean that you can't access it, but you wouldn't be able to directly access it from outside. Let's do an example of this. So guys, as you can see, what I've got here is an example of a class for a user, and this user has a username and a password. And what we've done is we've gone ahead and made the password private. So now that I've instantiated a user with its username and its password, if I was to use the dot method to display username, and let's print that. So let's go back and let's print, and let's do the same thing again, and let's do that this time for password. So what should happen is we should get an error, and as you can see, what's happened is when line 8 runs, we're able to print the username, okay? But when it comes to line 9, it says object has no attribute password on line 9 of main. So in other words, it couldn't find the password. So what we'd need to do is we'd need to have what's known as a getter method to get that password. So we would use getter and setter methods to provide a controlled method of accessing those attributes from within a class. Because what you wouldn't want to do is display a password at any cost. And so you wouldn't want someone to be able to use the dot method to be able to access that password from outside the class. Instead, what you might want to do is just compare to see if the password that they typed in is the same as the password that exists. So using a method, let's say a getter method, you still wouldn't use it to display what the password might be. In this example here of bank account again, so we've got a method here for depositing. So that way we increase the amount. So here in this method, we take self as an argument. So we have the balance, we can play with the balance. And we have an amount. And what this allows us to do is increase the balance by the amount that's passed through as an argument. And we can do the same for withdraw. But again, this way, before we withdraw, before we lessen the balance, we're making sure that the amount is not more than the balance within the account. Otherwise, it will output that funds are insufficient. And then what we have here lastly is we've got a third method that just says get balance, which just returns the balance for us. So I thought it might be a good idea just to run you through a couple of the tasks. The first task, as always in the Collab documents, is that they usually fill the blanks just to get you to practice and remember the keywords that need to be used. The second task is for you to write a getter method and then to write a setter method as well. So the reason why I'm saying this is maybe before we move on to the next part, you might want to finish this task and then, pause it and then finish the task and then come back to the rest of the video after you've finished. Take his advice and pause for a moment. So hopefully you've tried that out. And the last concept that we'll look at then is something called polymorphism. And we'll just look at it in a really basic way. And what this does then is this allows the child class, which inherits from the parent, to sometimes morph or change the action of a method from the parent class, and it might need to differ. So for example, here our parent class of animal has a method that says make sound. In this case, we've just said pass because it's a generic animal, we don't know what sound it makes. It does nothing in this case. But then the dog class, which inherits from the animal, the parent class, it has the same method. So it says make sound, but this time it will output a woof. Whereas the cat class, which also inherits from the parent class animal, when we call the make sound method, this time it will meow. Another good example of that is similar. It's not quite polymorphism, but it is a similar idea. Is the len function in Python, which, you know, if it's applied to a string, it returns the amount of characters in a string. If it's applied to a list or a tuple or a tuple, however you say it, then it returns the amount of elements. And for a dictionary, it also does the same thing. It returns the amount of key value pairs. So as a last task for you guys in the notebook, what we have is a task for you to try out where you're going to recreate the len function. And if I just show it here, there we go. So I want you to try and recreate the len function. And this time what we'll do is we'll call it new len. And your task is, without using the actual len function itself, built in Python, is for you to recreate that in Python in your class here. And you need to find a way to count the amount of characters in a string, the amount of elements in a list, and the amount of key value pairs in a dictionary without using a len function. So that's just a nice little challenge. And that's it. So we're keeping this one nice and short. See you in the next video, hopefully.